Hi guys, back in January I promised you some videos on tarot and my evolving relationship with tarot as I focus more and more on using the cards just for reading for myself, for my own personal development and for spiritual connection and that kind of thing. So I think the main thing that I've noticed over the last couple of weeks is that although I am stepping away from a more spiritual understanding of the cards, I find that I still kind of step into a place of kind of suspended disbelief when I'm using the cards, even though, like I say, that I've been focusing on using them kind of logically in a very naturalistic sense. And that has been working perfectly well for me. And in fact, I think that actually is the best way for me to really use the cards to delve into what's really going on with me emotionally and just underneath all these layers, and to really kind of pull apart what's happening in my internal landscape and how best to move forward. Really the most effective way for me to do that is to kind of suspend my disbelief in the cards as being sort of omniscient or having some sort of higher knowledge about the situation. I definitely still treat them as though they almost as though they are kind of beings or nuggets of wisdom that are presenting themselves to me and giving me exactly what I need in the moment. And this is interesting to me because basically this is how I learned tarot, and this is how most people approach tarot. For a lot of people, this is literally how they understand it to work. And this is something that I thought I was going to start struggling against, but I find that when I'm actually sitting in the moment, reading the cards and journaling, it doesn't matter to me whether or not I literally believe that that is the case, that that is how things work. That's kind of beside the point. And instead I just want to focus on how best to really kind of mine the wisdom of the deck and the messages that I can find therein. So when I'm journaling, I will still write things like, this card suggests that this is what's going on. This card illuminates this, and this card connects to this other card, and therefore that suggests that this is what's happening. And that language kind of suggests that there's some higher truth or some ultimate truth that these cards are presenting to me, that they're not chosen at random, but that they actually have been chosen for me in some way. And while that isn't really something that logically I have decided I necessarily believe, like I say, in the moment of using them, that doesn't matter. And I find that there's a lot more meat to get off the bone once I actually step into that particular belief that these particular cards have something to tell me. And if anything, I've actually found it to be a more productive experience now that I've let go of all of those doubts and uncertainties. I'm no longer trying to prove anything to myself when I use the deck, when I journal with the deck. I'm no longer trying to prove to myself what I do or don't believe about tarot, about how our minds work, or how any of these systems work. Rather, I'm trying to see what I can find in myself. I'm trying to see what I can kind of dig up. And if the best way to trick myself into doing that is to say, these cards in front of me are absolutely true, they are, the message that is needed at this time. If that's what kind of brings the best results, then I'm more than happy to do that. And so far, it really does seem that that is the best way for me to go ahead. Now, I'm not sure if this is just because this is how I learned tarot, that it's gotten very ingrained, because I've never come across any resources that really hugely stray away from that understanding of the cards, that there is some deep synchronicity involved with the cards that get chosen. That kind of maybe is how it has to work. There are definitely alternatives, especially with regard to choosing cards consciously and things like that, and those are things that I do want to explore and experiment with, and I'll make videos about later. But I found myself when I'm just sitting down to quickly draw a couple of cards, or if I do actually want to do a more in-depth kind of reading for myself, just organically I will slip into that kind of standard tarot reading technique, and it works very well for me. And that's been interesting to me. I'm also really feeling the whole spread thing again. I go through phases of not wanting to use spreads because I want to start trying to use the cards in more organic ways. But when it comes to actually having a specific and quite complicated situation, or just a more overarching kind of self-exploration that I want to do, if I want to sit down with my diary and really kind of get a handle on something, or get a handle on my situation, my emotional situation right now, the best way for me to do that, or the easiest way for me to do that, is to actually formulate a spread. And I find that I tend to do this kind of on the cuff. So I will sit down and think to myself, okay, what is it that I want to explore right now? Now, for all that I've just said, that I have been kind of slipping into a more traditional tarot reading style, when I'm designing the spread for myself, in the moment, I definitely focus very, very particularly on my own emotions, on my inner self. I'm not asking anything that I don't know already. And that is, for me, probably the best way to make sure that there's no kind of cognitive dissonance, that I'm not trying to do something with the cards that on some logical level I don't actually think I can do. Because if my card positions are things like, how do I feel about this situation? What's causing me to feel this way? What's blocking me in this way? What can help me to untangle this? What can bring me clarity? What can bring me more energy with regard to this kind of area of my inner being? And so if I focus on that, I don't have to worry about asking questions about like the future or other people or other situations or other scenarios or anything that actually would involve me to have any ability to step outside of my own mind. Then the whole thing just runs much more smoothly for me in terms of my own kind of approach to tarot. And so far it's been mostly about troubleshooting for me. It's been about, okay, how am I feeling about this situation, and how can I kind of clarify it for myself, improve it for myself, and things like that. I have been steering away from looking at things that are maybe more vague, or drawing cards in a more kind of vague way and attempting to draw messages from them, because that for me maybe strays a little bit too much into the insinuation that there is some deep synchronicity involved with the particular card and a message that it needs to convey me in the moment. Because even if that's my basic starting point for creating a spread like I've just described, at least the actual process of journaling, it's something that I could have done without drawing the cards in the first place, if that makes sense. I'm not relying on the cards necessarily to drive me. And I mean, that's definitely something that I will do in future. I really like the idea of drawing cards randomly. I particularly like kind of drawing oracle cards randomly and stuff like that in the mornings and stuff, and things of that nature. But I feel like I need to start maybe from a point of using spreads and using traditional tarot, and work myself up from that point, feeling comfortable with the processes that I'm using before I can kind of get to that point of being able to draw cards much more randomly and riff from them more organically. So I'm currently finding this sort of balancing point between suspension of disbelief, which allows me to really dig deep into my own psyche and my own current emotional state, and kind of tipping over into cognitive dissonance, tipping over into feeling like I'm doing something that rings false to me, that doesn't quite ring true, and that ultimately therefore feels a bit hollow. And so for right now, that means that this process does require a lot of journaling for me to feel like it's of use. I don't necessarily feel right now like drawing a card just on a whim and looking at it and thinking, oh, okay, well that's making me think of this. I'm not finding that so useful right now, because the messages that I'm receiving then are quite top level or shallow or something. It's the kind of thing that kind of quick fire drawing of cards. It's the kind of thing that if I felt like a deep belief in the synchronicity of which card I draw at any one time, then there would be kind of a greater point in me doing that, and there might be kind of a feeling that it's going to give me a bit of advice for the day or something like that. But when I feel like it's really all just coming from me, in order to get into the habit of seeing it that way and looking at it from that perspective, I think right now it does need to involve a lot of journaling. So yeah, that's been interesting, but I've actually really enjoyed making the time to to spend with tarot again. I got the Shadowscapes deck out again yesterday morning. I gave myself a bit of a sick morning, and I spent some time just sitting at my desk looking out at the sunlit tree outside my window, drawing a big 10 card spread and just journaling about it to my heart's content. And it really tapped me back into kind of, although I'm seeing this as a process that isn't innately spiritual or connected to my kind of devotional spirituality, it really tapped me back into this kind of feeling that I used to have back in the day when I first started reading tarot, this excitement about what I could unearth and what I could realize about myself and my position in the world through these cards. And they really just give my journaling this extra push, this extra depth, and they really actually allow me to realize more about myself. And I find that really, really exciting and really inspiring. And it reminded me why in the first place I actually wanted to read for others, because it's such a joyful experience for me, having that moment of clarity and just the feeling that I have when I sit down with a journal and with a deck. And I just wanted to bring that to other people. But you know, as I've explained in one of my previous videos, and I'll link them below or somewhere for you to find, it's just not working for me right now to read for others. So that's why I kind of want to focus on this. Go back to the basics, I suppose. I want to go back to where I started from with tarot, where it just resonated with me on some really deep level and made me feel really hopeful and positive and excited and creative. And I really want to work on that. So yeah, more to come on this, and I hope you're all well. If you haven't subscribed already, then do please click on the big red subscribe button below, and you can also find links to social media and my website, and a link to follow my newsletter, which I send out once a month. And I've been really enjoying making a little audio file for you guys and sending that in the newsletter at the kind of the beginning of every month. So take care, guys. I'll be talking to you again soon about tarot, I hope.